Hi everyone. So let's continue to discuss on JUnit 5 assumptions, and in this lecture we will discuss about assume true method. So friends, here assumptions API has a static utility method by name assume true. So this method helps us in validating that the provided assumption is true. Also friends, in our last lecture we discussed about assumptions. We saw that those are the preconditions that needs to be satisfied for the further execution of the test case. So here assume true method helps us in validating that the provided assumption is true. And in our last lecture we also discussed that assumptions, if they are not satisfied, they throw test aborted exception. So here if the assumption condition is true, then the test proceeds further for execution. And if the assumption condition is false, then test execution is aborted. So friends, here assume true method takes in a Boolean condition, and it assumes that whatever the condition we are passing it should be true. So if the condition is true, then our assumption is passed, so test proceeds further for the execution. But if the condition passed is false, then it signifies that the assumption is not true, so the test execution is aborted by throwing test aborted exception. So friends, when our assumptions are failed, that particular test case is aborted. So in the JUnit console you can see that particular test case is being skipped. So unlike assertions, as our test cases were failed, if we provide assumptions, our test cases are simply skipped. So friends, now let's discuss about assume true overloaded methods. So the first method takes in a Boolean, which is our assumption. So if this assumption is true, then the test case proceeds further for the execution, and if it is false, then this method throws test aborted exception, simply skipping the test case. The second method takes in a Boolean assumption, and along with that it takes a string message. So this string message is nothing but our customized message. So when our assumption is failed, the test is skipped. But in JUnit console you can see that if you have provided any customized message, then that gets printed. The third overloaded method takes in an assumption and a supplier function interface. So this supplier function interface also supplies a string message whenever our assumption will fail. So the only advantage of using supplier function interface is that it gets lazily evaluated to a string message only when our assumption is failed. The fourth overloaded method is very much similar to the first overloaded method. So instead of a Boolean, it takes in a Boolean supplier, which is nothing but a function interface which supplies a Boolean condition. The fifth overloaded method is also pretty much same to the second, that instead of Boolean value, we provide a function interface which supplies a Boolean condition. And similarly, the sixth overloaded method is pretty much same as the third. So here instead of Boolean value, we are providing a function interface by name Boolean supplier which supplies a Boolean condition. So friends, let's go to Eclipse and see the demonstration of assume true method.